Lighting in Arnold works pretty much the same way as it does in ART or later versions of Mental Ray, which is that global illumination is automatic. And as we saw in the last movie, we can control the number of rays or bounces in order to get an optimal result with that GI solution. The best way to work with lighting in Arnold is through the active shade window. Go to the Render Setup dialog. Set the target to active shade mode and choose Arnold as the renderer. You can additionally go into the Arnold Renderer tab and you can reduce the number of camera samples to get better performance in the active shade window. I'll bring that camera AA samples parameter down to 1. It's also a good idea to open up any windows or panels that you need to work with before launching the active shade window. Let's go to the rendering menu and open up the environment dialog. We're using the physical camera exposure control with an exposure value of 7. And I've also got an environment map loaded in here, and it can provide an image-based lighting solution, but I've currently got it disabled, so use map is off. Let's do an active shade rendering. Click on the render button. And the active shade window launches, showing that we've got a single key light active here. Arnold respects some properties of lights, such as shadow casting. However, you're not able to exclude Arnold from rendering certain objects or not through the ordinary light exclusion list. But shadow casting is respected. So if we select these rim lights back here, either one of them, go over to the Modify panel and turn the light on. Under Light Properties, just tick the On switch. And we're getting a little bit of a highlight there. We can make that even more obvious by turning off the spotlight. So select that spot or key light and turn it off for a moment. Here's the rim light. We're actually seeing 2 rim lights, one on each side. Okay, so I can select either one of those. And you can see that shadow casting is turned off. And if I turn shadows on, then the background set here, this wall, is casting a shadow onto the subject. Okay, so I can turn the shadows back off again, and I can also turn my key light back on again. So lighting in Arnold is pretty similar to other renderers, including environmental or image-based lighting effects. In my environment and effects dialog, I've got that environment map. Just turn the switch to turn it on, and if the active shade mode doesn't respect that, then you'll just need to click the render button again. Now we've got our image-based lighting solution added. And of course, it's very grainy here because our number of camera samples is very low. Maybe I'll increase that just 1 notch up to a value of 2 and click the render button again. And that render took a little bit longer than before, but it's worth it, so we've got better fidelity in the rendering. The takeaway here is that photometric lights and environment mapping work just fine in Arnold. And if you want to, you can just stick with those tools. Arnold also provides its own native light. Let's take a look at that. I'll turn these other lights off. I'll select them one by one and turn them off. Select that key light, switch that off as well. And then we've got our environment map. I'll turn that off too. Now we've got a black screen. And I'm just going to now create an Arnold light. Go to the Create panel, Lights. In the category pull down, choose Arnold. And there's only one Arnold light here. So we'll just click that button and then click in the top view to create the light. And that'll be a skylight in our scene. We're not seeing anything in our active shade. So we'll need to move that light up. Select the Move tool. And in the left view, I'll right click to activate that view and then move that skylight up. And we might see a little flicker of light over here in our active shade, but we won't see much until we start playing around with the light parameters. With that light still selected, let's now go over to the Modify panel. And in the Modify panel for an Arnold light, we have a lot of very cool options. For example, right up at the top, we can change the type of that light, and there are a lot of options here. I'm going to leave it at Quad to simulate a skylight in the ceiling. And there are a bunch of other options here. We're not going to have time to go over all of them, but I want to just cover the most important things. Scrolling down a little bit, very importantly, we have the intensity. We got a traditional intensity value here, like you would for a standard 3ds Max light. But we've also got this exposure value here. And that works just like exposure on a camera. And that is each numeric integer that you increase the exposure will double the amount of light. So if I set my exposure to 9, then I'm actually doubling the amount of light. 10 is quadrupling it from 8. And each time I bring this up by one number, I'm increasing the amount of light. But I can also increase the amount of light by scaling the light. And we have the option to cause the scaling to affect the overall illumination or not. So let's see what happens. I'll select the scale tool, and in the top view, I'll just scale that light up. And I'm not seeing much happen over here. So in my active shade window, it's still looking very dark. So let's now turn off this normalize energy switch. And now as we scale the light up and down, that's changing the overall amount of illumination in the shot. All right, I'll move this over, grab the move tool, bring this out a little bit so it's farther away. So I can bring the exposure up and down, maybe set that to a value of 10 or something like that. And as you can see, that's dramatically affecting the overall illumination. Let's give it a value of 10. And then if I turn normalize energy on, then I'll need to have a much, much brighter light. So I'll set my intensity up a bit. Let's give the intensity a value of 10. And the exposure a value of, let's make it 15. So now we've got pretty good lighting in terms of the overall intensity for this skylight, which is pretty far away back here. And if I turn normalize energy on and scale the light, what I'm doing is I'm changing the size of the light without changing the amount of overall illumination. And with a larger area light, now I'm getting a lot softer shadows here. And if I bring that down, then I get sharper shadows. Cool, so those are the basics of working with lighting in Arnold. Again, we don't have time to cover the entirety of the Arnold feature set in this short course. But just keep in mind that photometric lights and standard environment image-based lighting work just fine in Arnold. And you also have the option of using the Arnold native light.